In the heart of New York City, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and dreams were as vast as the horizon, lived Eleanor Hartwell. At just 30 years old, she had built an empire from scratch, a feat that earned her admiration, but also a reputation for being fiercely independent. Eleanor wasn't your typical millionaire. She didn't rely on family wealth or luck. Instead, she clawed her way to success with grit, intelligence, and a stubborn refusal to settle for anything less than extraordinary. Yet, despite her professional triumphs, her personal life remained untouched by romance. Friends often teased her about it, calling her married to her work during casual dinners and cocktail parties. One evening, Eleanor attended a high-profile charity gala at a luxurious hotel. The room sparkled with chandeliers casting golden light over polished marble floors. Guests mingled in designer gowns and tailored suits, sipping champagne while discussing art, politics, and business deals. Eleanor moved gracefully through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries but feeling slightly detached. Her mind wandered until a group of her closest friends cornered her near the bar. They joked about her lack of romantic adventures, suggesting she might be too picky, or perhaps afraid to take risks when it came to love. "Eleanor," one friend said with a playful smirk, "you're so confident in everything else. Why not try taking a chance on someone completely unexpected?" The comment struck a nerve. Eleanor hated being challenged, especially publicly. With a raised eyebrow, she shot back. "Unexpected? Like who? You think I'm scared?" Her friends laughed, egging her on. "Prove us wrong," another chimed in. "Marry someone totally out of your league, someone no one would ever see coming." It was meant to be harmless banter, but Eleanor felt her competitive spirit flare up. She glanced around the room, scanning faces until her gaze landed on Harold Thompson. Known affectionately as Biggie, Harold was a local chef famous for his hearty meals and infectious laugh. He stood near the buffet table, happily chatting with guests while sneaking bites of hors d'oeuvres. His round frame and jovial demeanor contrasted sharply with Eleanor's polished appearance, making him the perfect candidate to prove her point. Without hesitation, Eleanor marched across the room, heels clicking against the floor. Curious eyes followed her movement, sensing drama brewing. When she reached Harold, she extended her hand with a dazzling smile. "Hi, I'm Eleanor. We haven't met before, but I have a proposition for you." Harold blinked, caught off guard. Okay. "I'll get straight to the point," Eleanor continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "How would you feel about getting married?" Harold nearly choked on the mini quiche he'd been chewing. "Married? To you?" "Yes, to me," Eleanor replied smoothly. "Just hear me out. It's temporary, 6 months tops. Think of it as an experiment. And trust me, I'll make sure it's worth your while." For a moment, Harold stared at her, unsure if this was some elaborate prank. But there was something sincere in Eleanor's tone, even beneath the audacity of her proposal. After a brief pause, he shrugged and grinned. "Well, why not? Life's too short to say no to crazy ideas." And just like that, amidst gasps and murmurs from onlookers, they shook hands on the deal. What started as a reckless challenge between friends quickly spiraled into something far more intriguing and unpredictable. Little did they know, this impulsive decision would change both their lives forever. The whirlwind of the gala faded into reality as Eleanor and Harold began planning their marriage. Despite the absurdity of their agreement, Eleanor was determined to make it look legitimate. She hired a wedding planner within hours of leaving the event, insisting on a small, yet elegant ceremony that would take place in just 2 weeks. For her, this wasn't about love or commitment. It was a game, a challenge to prove she could do anything she set her mind to. Harold, on the other hand, approached the situation with a mix of curiosity and humor. If nothing else, he told himself, "This will be one heck of a story to tell my grandkids someday." Their first meeting after the bet took place in Eleanor's penthouse, a lavish apartment perched high above Central Park. The walls were adorned with modern art, and every piece of furniture screamed luxury. Harold stepped inside cautiously, feeling out of place in his casual jeans and sweater. He couldn't help but marvel at the view through the floor-to-ceiling windows, where the city stretched endlessly before him. Eleanor greeted him with a clipboard in hand, already diving into logistics. "We need to establish ground rules," she said matter-of-factly. "This is a business arrangement, not a romance novel." Harold nodded, though part of him wondered if living together might blur those lines. Over the next hour, they hashed out details. How they'd handle finances. Eleanor insisted on covering everything. Where Harold would stay, a guest room far from hers, and even what excuses they'd give curious friends and family. They agreed to keep things professional, avoiding unnecessary intimacy or emotional entanglements. Yet, despite their best intentions, neither could ignore the awkwardness that lingered between them. Life under the same roof proved challenging almost immediately. Eleanor thrived on structure and precision, waking up at dawn for yoga sessions and meticulously organizing her day. Harold, however, preferred a more relaxed pace. He often slept late, hummed while cooking breakfast, and left crumbs on the counter, a habit that drove Eleanor crazy. Their contrasting lifestyles led to frequent clashes. One morning, Eleanor snapped when she found dirty dishes piled in the sink. "Do you live like this all the time?" she asked, exasperated. Harold chuckled nervously, shrugging. "Pretty much. Guess I'll have to step up my game." But it wasn't just household habits that caused tension. Eleanor struggled to understand Harold's easygoing attitude toward life. To her, success meant constant effort and sacrifice. Harold, meanwhile, believed in enjoying the moment and finding joy in simple pleasures. This fundamental difference sometimes made conversation feel strained. During dinner one night, Eleanor mentioned her latest investment project, detailing spreadsheets and profit margins with enthusiasm. Harold listened politely but eventually interrupted. "You ever think about slowing down? Taking a break to enjoy what you've built?" Eleanor froze, caught off guard by the question. "Slowing down isn't an option," she replied curtly. "There's always more to achieve." Harold let the subject drop, sensing her discomfort, but the exchange left both of them quiet for the rest of the meal. Despite these challenges, there were moments of unexpected connection. Late one evening, Harold played soft music on a Bluetooth speaker while preparing a homemade lasagna. The aroma filled the apartment, drawing Eleanor out of her home office. She leaned against the kitchen doorway, watching him move with surprising grace. "That smells amazing," she admitted reluctantly. Harold grinned, handing her a glass of red wine. "Care to join me for a taste test?" As they sat together at the dining table, sharing food and laughter, something shifted. For the first time since their bizarre arrangement began, they weren't thinking about rules or expectations. They were simply two people sharing a meal and discovering bits of each other's worlds. It was fleeting, but undeniable, a glimpse of potential that neither wanted to acknowledge just yet. Still, the seed had been planted, hinting at possibilities neither had anticipated when they shook hands at the gala. As the weeks rolled by, Eleanor and Harold began to settle into a rhythm that neither had anticipated. At first, their interactions were stiff and awkward, like two actors rehearsing lines they didn't fully believe. But over time, small moments of connection started to chip away at the walls they'd built around themselves. It wasn't anything dramatic, just tiny glimpses of humanity that made them realize there was more to each other than met the eye. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Eleanor returned home to find Harold in the kitchen experimenting with a new recipe. Flour dusted his sweater, and he was humming an old jazz tune under his breath. She paused in the doorway, watching him toss ingredients together with surprising care. "What are you making now?" she asked, her tone softer than usual. Harold turned, startled but smiling. "Chicken piccata. Thought I'd try something fancy for once." He gestured toward the counter. "Want to help? You look like you could use a break." Eleanor hesitated. She wasn't used to being invited into such domestic moments, especially not by someone like Harold. Cooking felt messy and chaotic, two things she avoided at all costs. But there was something inviting about the way he moved, so confident yet unassuming. Against her better judgment, she rolled up her sleeves and joined him. At first, it was clumsy. Eleanor accidentally spilled flour on the floor, earning a teasing grin from Harold. "Careful," he said, handing her a whisk. "You're supposed to mix it, not throw it around." They laughed, and for the first time in years, Eleanor felt herself relax. There was no pressure to perform, no deadlines looming overhead. Just the simple act of creating something together. That night, as they sat down to eat, Eleanor couldn't deny how good the dish tasted, or how much fun she'd had making it. "Not bad," she admitted, taking another bite. Harold raised an eyebrow. "Just not bad? I thought I nailed it." "You did," she replied, surprising even herself with the honesty. For a moment they locked eyes, and Eleanor felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Was it admiration? Gratitude? Whatever it was, it lingered long after dinner ended. These shared experiences became more frequent as days turned into weeks. One rainy afternoon, while stuck indoors, Harold introduced Eleanor to his favorite movies, a mix of classic comedies and heartwarming dramas. At first she resisted, claiming she didn't have time for silly distractions. But Harold's enthusiasm was contagious, and soon she found herself laughing at slapstick humor and tearing up during poignant scenes. In return, Eleanor encouraged Harold to pursue his dream of attending culinary school. She noticed how passionate he became when talking about cooking techniques or flavor combinations. "Why haven't you done this sooner?" she asked one evening as they flipped through brochures. Harold shrugged, looking sheepish. "I guess I never thought I'd be good enough, plus life got in the way." "Well, maybe it's time to change that," Eleanor said firmly. "If anyone can do it, it's you." Her words caught him off guard. No one had ever spoken to him with such conviction before. Slowly, Harold began applying to programs, buoyed by Eleanor's belief in him. In turn, he inspired her to loosen up, reminding her that perfection wasn't everything. When she stumbled over a difficult yoga pose one morning, he laughed and joined her on the mat, both of them collapsing into giggles. Their initial agreement to keep things platonic slowly blurred as these moments accumulated. Late-night conversations stretched longer, filled with stories of childhood dreams and past regrets. They discovered common ground in their struggles, Eleanor's fear of failure, Harold's battle with self-doubt, and found comfort in knowing they weren't alone. One chilly evening, as they bundled up for a walk through Central Park, Harold stopped near a fountain and turned to Eleanor. "You know," he said, his breath visible in the cold air, "this whole thing started as a bet. But lately, I feel like we've become real friends." Eleanor smiled, though her heart skipped a beat. "Me too," she admitted quietly. The realization unsettled her, not because it was untrue, but because it hinted at emotions she wasn't ready to confront. Still, as they continued walking side by side, she couldn't deny the warmth spreading inside her chest. Something was changing between them, and for the first time she wasn't sure she wanted to fight it. News of Eleanor Hartwell's unconventional marriage spread faster than wildfire. In a city where gossip was practically a sport, the pairing of a wealthy, high-profile businesswoman with a cheerful, unassuming chef became the talk of the town. Social media buzzed with memes and hashtags like #OddCoupleNYC, while bloggers speculated endlessly about their relationship. Was it genuine, a publicity stunt, or something more sinister? Eleanor tried to ignore the chatter at first, focusing instead on her work and her growing bond with Harold. But avoiding the spotlight wasn't easy when photographers seemed to lurk around every corner. Paparazzi camped outside their building, snapping photos whenever they stepped out together. At first, Harold found it amusing. He even waved at the cameras once or twice. But Eleanor grew increasingly frustrated. She hated feeling exposed, as though her carefully curated life was being dissected for public entertainment. Things escalated when a tabloid published an article titled, "The Millionaire and the Chef Lover Lies." The piece painted Harold in an unflattering light, questioning his motives and suggesting he was using Eleanor for her money. Quotes from anonymous sources claimed Harold had confided in friends about his plans to secure a hefty divorce settlement. Eleanor skimmed the article over breakfast, her jaw tightening with each sentence. When she reached the end, she slammed the magazine onto the table, startling Harold. "What's this?" she demanded, shoving the paper toward him. Harold picked it up, scanning the headline before groaning. "Oh no, not again?" "Not again?" Eleanor repeated sharply. "You've dealt with stuff like this before?" Harold sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, back when I worked at Joe's Diner. Some guy I knew made up stories about me scamming customers. It blew over eventually, but—" He trailed off, meeting her gaze. "I swear, I didn't say any of that stuff they're quoting. You know me better than that, right?" Eleanor hesitated. Part of her wanted to trust him. After all, they'd shared so many honest moments lately. But doubt crept in, fueled by years of protecting herself from betrayal. What if Harold had been playing her all along? What if this entire arrangement had been a calculated move? Her silence spoke volumes. Harold's face fell, hurt flashing in his eyes. "Wow," he muttered, standing up abruptly. "I thought we were past this." "Past what?" Eleanor shot back, defensive now. "People don't change overnight, Harold. Maybe you're just better at hiding who you really are." The words hung heavy in the air, sharp and cutting. Harold stared at her for a moment longer before grabbing his coat and heading out the door. Eleanor sank into her chair, suddenly regretting her accusation. Why had she lashed out like that? Deep down, she knew Harold wasn't the type to scheme or deceive, but fear had clouded her judgment. Over the next few days, tension simmered between them. They barely spoke, each retreating into their own world. Harold threw himself into cooking, experimenting with elaborate recipes late into the night. Eleanor buried herself in work, attending meetings and signing documents with robotic efficiency. Neither mentioned the argument, but the distance between them felt suffocating. Meanwhile, the gossip mill continued to churn. Friends called Eleanor, offering unsolicited advice. "Are you sure about him?" one asked cautiously. "He seems nice, but people can surprise you." Others urged her to cut ties before things got worse. Even Harold's co-workers chimed in, teasing him about his newfound fame. Though well-meaning, their jokes only deepened his frustration. One evening, unable to take the isolation any longer, Eleanor decided to confront Harold. She found him in the kitchen, kneading dough with fierce concentration. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms dusted with flour. For a moment, she simply watched him, reminded of how much she admired his dedication and how foolish she'd been to doubt him. "Harold," she began softly, stepping closer. He paused but didn't look up. "I owe you an apology." He glanced at her briefly, his expression guarded. "For what?" "For jumping to conclusions," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I let those lies get inside my head, and I said things I didn't mean. You've been nothing but kind to me since day one, and I shouldn't have questioned that." Harold studied her for a long moment before exhaling slowly. "It's okay," he said finally. "I get it. Trust isn't easy for either of us, but if we're going to make this work, even just for 6 months, we need to stop letting other people dictate how we feel about each other." Eleanor nodded, relief washing over her. As they stood there amidst the comforting aroma of fresh bread, she realized how fragile their connection still was. Yet, despite the doubts and challenges, there was something worth fighting for, something real. The fragile peace between Eleanor and Harold was tested once again when an unexpected crisis struck. One afternoon, Harold received a phone call from his estranged older brother, Daniel. It had been years since they'd spoken. Daniel had always resented Harold for staying close to their father while he chose to leave home at 18. But now Daniel's voice was strained and desperate. Their father, who had battled diabetes for years, was in critical condition after suffering a severe infection. Medical bills were piling up and Daniel couldn't cover them alone. Harold listened in stunned silence, gripping the phone tightly. His father had disowned him years ago, accusing him of being lazy and unmotivated. Despite their fractured relationship, Harold still cared deeply for his dad. The thought of losing him without making amends weighed heavily on his heart. Yet asking for help felt impossible. He didn't want to burden Eleanor, especially not after the recent tabloid drama that had shaken their trust. For days, Harold wrestled with his emotions. He avoided talking about it, retreating into himself whenever Eleanor asked if something was wrong. She noticed the change immediately. He barely ate, snapped at her over small things, and spent hours staring out the window. Concerned, she finally confronted him one evening as they sat in the living room. "Okay, spill it," Eleanor said, setting aside her laptop. "You've been acting weird all week. What's going on?" Harold hesitated, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "It's my dad," he admitted reluctantly. "He's sick. Really sick. And I don't know what to do." Eleanor leaned forward, her expression softening. "Tell me everything." As Harold explained the situation, tears welled up in his eyes. He talked about his complicated family history, the fights, the misunderstandings, and the guilt he carried for not trying harder to fix things. By the time he finished, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I feel like I should help, but I can't afford it, not without, well, asking you." Eleanor studied him, her mind racing. On one hand, she understood why Harold hesitated to bring this to her. It wasn't easy to ask for money, especially given the rumors circulating about him. On the other hand, she admired his honesty and vulnerability. For someone who prided herself on independence, Eleanor realized how much she valued seeing that same quality in Harold. "You don't need to apologize for needing help," she said gently. "If you want to support your family, I'll back you. No strings attached." Harold blinked, surprised by her offer. "Really? After everything, after those articles, you'd still trust me?" "Yes," Eleanor replied firmly. "Because I know who you are. Those stories don't define you." Her words brought tears to Harold's eyes. For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. Together, they worked out a plan. Eleanor would cover half the medical expenses, and Harold would take responsibility for paying her back over time. It wasn't charity. It was partnership. But just as they started moving forward, doubt crept back into Eleanor's mind. What if Harold's hesitation hadn't been about pride or fear of judgment? What if he had been hiding something? The thought gnawed at her, fueled by lingering insecurities. When Harold left the apartment to visit his father in the hospital, Eleanor found herself scrolling through old messages and emails, searching for clues she might have missed. By the time Harold returned, exhausted but relieved to see his father stable, Eleanor's suspicions had spiraled out of control. She cornered him in the kitchen, her tone sharp and accusatory. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Were you planning to keep this from me?" Harold froze, confusion etched across his face. "What are you talking about?" "The money," Eleanor snapped. "You waited so long to say anything. How do I know you weren't using this whole situation to manipulate me?" Harold stared at her, hurt flashing in his eyes. "Manipulate? You seriously? After everything we've been through, you think I'd stoop to that?" "I don't know what to think anymore," Eleanor shot back, her voice rising. "People lie, Harold, even people we trust." The argument escalated quickly, both of them saying things they didn't mean. Harold accused Eleanor of being too cold and calculating to truly care about anyone. Eleanor fired back, calling him reckless and irresponsible. The tension reached a boiling point until Harold stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Eleanor sank onto the couch, her chest tight with regret. She knew she'd overreacted, letting fear dictate her actions instead of faith. But the damage was done, for now at least. As the silence stretched on, she wondered if their bond could survive yet another test, or had the cracks finally grown too deep to repair. The argument left a heavy silence in the apartment, stretching into hours and then days. Harold stayed, away, crashing at a friend's place to avoid facing Eleanor. For her part, Eleanor couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at her. She replayed their fight over and over in her mind, cringing at every harsh word she'd thrown at him. What had started as a moment of vulnerability for Harold had turned into another round of mistrust. And this time, it felt different, deeper, unable to focus on work or sleep. Eleanor decided to visit Harold's diner where he often spent his free time. The small eatery buzzed with activity when she arrived, patrons chatting over steaming plates of food. She spotted Harold behind the counter, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. His usual smile was absent, replaced by a tired expression that made her heart ache. Eleanor hesitated near the entrance, unsure if approaching him would make things worse. But before she could second-guess herself, Harold noticed her standing there. Their eyes met briefly, and though he didn't smile, he nodded toward the kitchen, a silent invitation. Inside, away from prying ears, Eleanor took a deep breath. "Harold, I'm sorry." He set down the spatula he'd been holding and crossed his arms, studying her carefully. "For what? Accusing me of lying? Or thinking I married you just to scam you?" Her cheeks flushed with shame. "Both," she admitted quietly. "I let my fears get the better of me. Again. I know you're not like that. You've shown me who you are, over and over, but I guess I'm scared of being wrong about people, of getting hurt." Harold sighed, leaning against the counter. "I get it, okay? Trust isn't easy for either of us. But we can't keep doing this, doubting each other every time something goes wrong. It's exhausting." "I know," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "And I hate that I made you feel like I don't believe in you. Because I do. More than I ever thought possible." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the diner faded into the background as they stood there, emotions hanging thick in the air. Finally, Harold broke the silence. "Look, I messed up too. I should have told you about my dad sooner instead of shutting you out. But I wasn't trying to hide anything. I just didn't want you to think less of me." Eleanor stepped closer, her eyes filled with tears. "How could I think less of you? You've been nothing but honest and kind since the day we met. If anything, I'm the one who hasn't been fair to you." Harold reached out hesitantly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We're both guilty of making mistakes, but maybe we can learn from them, start fresh." His touch sent a wave of relief through Eleanor. She nodded, wiping her tears. "Okay, let's try again. No more walls, no more assumptions. Just us." They spent the next hour talking, really talking, about everything that had gone unsaid. Harold opened up about his childhood, sharing stories of growing up in a household where love was often overshadowed by criticism. Eleanor listened intently, realizing how much strength it must have taken for him to stay positive despite those challenges. In turn, she confessed her own struggles, the pressure to succeed, the loneliness of building a life without anyone to share it with. By the time they left the diner, the weight between them had lifted. They walked back to the apartment side by side, hands brushing occasionally. Though neither said it aloud, they both knew something significant had shifted. This wasn't just an arrangement anymore. It was a partnership built on trust, even if it was still fragile. That night, as they sat together on the couch watching an old movie, Eleanor rested her head on Harold's shoulder. For the first time, in weeks, she felt truly at peace. Harold wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. Neither needed to say a word. They already understood. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Determined to take control of their narrative, Eleanor and Harold decided it was time to address the rumors head-on. They couldn't let tabloids and gossip dictate how people saw them, or how they saw each other. Sitting together at the kitchen table one morning, they brainstormed ideas for a public statement. "We need to show everyone that this isn't just some ridiculous bet or scheme," Eleanor said firmly. "It's real, whatever this is." Harold nodded, sipping his coffee. "Agreed. But we also can't sugarcoat it. People will see right through us if we try to make it sound perfect." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Perfect? With you? Never." Her teasing tone lightened the mood, and Harold chuckled. Despite everything they'd been through, their ability to laugh together remained one of the strongest threads holding them together. They agreed on a press conference, a bold move, but one that would give them a platform to speak directly to the public. Eleanor handled the logistics, booking a venue and inviting reporters from reputable outlets. Harold focused on what he wanted to say, crafting heartfelt notes about gratitude, second chances, and following your dreams. Together, they practiced, their lines rehearsing late into the night until they felt ready. The day of the conference arrived and nerves buzzed in the air. Eleanor wore a sleek navy dress, her usual polished self, while Harold opted for a tailored suit that made him look more confident than ever. As they stepped onto the stage, flashes erupted from cameras and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eleanor gripped Harold's hand tightly, drawing strength from his presence. "Thank you all for being here today," Eleanor began, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "Over the past few months, there has been a lot of speculation about my marriage to Harold. Some of it amusing, some of it hurtful, and most of it completely inaccurate." She paused, glancing at Harold before continuing. "Yes, our relationship started under unusual circumstances, but what grew out of it, what we've built together, is genuine. Harold isn't who the headlines say he is. He's kind, hardworking, and endlessly supportive, and I'm grateful to have him in my life." Harold took over, his deep voice resonating through the room. "When I first met Eleanor, I thought she was way out of my league. Honestly, I still do sometimes, but she's taught me to believe in myself, to chase my dreams without fear. That's why I've decided to enroll in culinary school and pursue my passion for cooking professionally." He went on to share his vision of opening a community kitchen to feed those in need, inspired by Eleanor's philanthropic spirit. The audience listened intently, many visibly moved by his sincerity. When he finished, applause filled the room, warm and genuine. Afterward, reporters bombarded them with questions, but Eleanor and Harold handled each one with grace and humor. One journalist asked if they planned to stay married beyond the 6-month mark. Eleanor glanced at Harold, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Let's just say, we're taking things one day at a time." By the end of the event, social media lit up with positive reactions. Fans praised their honesty and called their story inspiring. Even skeptics admitted that seeing them side by side made it hard to doubt their connection. For once, the narrative belonged to them, not the gossip mill. That evening, as they returned home, Harold wrapped an arm around Eleanor's shoulders. "Well, that wasn't so bad," he joked. "No," Eleanor replied, leaning into him. "It wasn't. In fact, it felt freeing." For the first time, they stood united against the world, proving that love could blossom in the unlikeliest places, and that trust, when nurtured, could withstand even the harshest storms. As the 6-month mark of their unconventional marriage approached, Eleanor's friends brought up the bet once again. Over lunch at a trendy cafe, they teased her playfully, reminding her of the challenge she had so boldly accepted. "So, are you going to admit defeat?" one friend asked with a smirk. "Or will you stick it out for round 2? Eleanor leaned back in her chair, swirling the straw in her iced tea thoughtfully. For weeks, she'd been dreading this conversation, not because she feared losing the bet, but because she no longer cared about winning. Her life had changed in ways she never anticipated, and the idea of ending things with Harold felt wrong. "I don't think I care about the bet anymore," she said finally, her tone soft but certain. "This isn't about proving a point or making headlines, it's about something much bigger than that." Her friends exchanged surprised glances, sensing the sincerity in her voice. One of them smiled knowingly. "Sounds like someone might be falling for their own husband." Eleanor didn't deny it. Instead, she changed the subject, eager to focus on what truly mattered, celebrating everything they'd accomplished together. That evening, as Harold prepared dinner in their kitchen, Eleanor joined him, sliding a neatly wrapped envelope across the counter. "What's this?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Open it," she urged, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. Inside was a brochure for culinary school, along with a handwritten note that read, "For your first day of class tomorrow. Can't wait to see you shine." Harold stared at it, his eyes widening in disbelief. "You didn't have to do this," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I did," Eleanor replied, stepping closer. "Because you deserve it." And because I want to support you every step of the way. Their bond deepened further as Harold threw himself into his studies, often staying up late to practice recipes and perfect techniques. Eleanor became his biggest cheerleader, tasting dishes and offering constructive feedback. Their shared goal of opening a community kitchen grew closer to reality, fueled by their combined determination and passion. Months later, the grand opening of Harold's restaurant, aptly named Second Chances, drew a crowd of friends, family, and supporters. Strings of fairy lights twinkled above outdoor tables, casting a warm glow over the bustling scene. Guests sampled gourmet meals crafted with love, while Harold greeted them with pride and gratitude. Eleanor stood beside him, watching as he mingled with patrons and shared stories of his journey. She couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come, from strangers brought together by a reckless wager to partners who genuinely cherished each other. As fireworks lit up the night sky, Harold pulled her close, whispering, "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes as she rested her head against his chest. "And thank you for showing me what real happiness feels like," she replied softly. In that moment, surrounded by laughter, music, and the promise of a future filled with possibilities, they realized the true shock wasn't just marrying someone unexpected. It was discovering that love could transform even the most unlikely beginnings into something extraordinary. Together, they had defied odds, silenced critics, and found joy in the unlikeliest of places. And as they danced under the stars hand in hand, they knew their story was only beginning.